Thank you for joining us for the webinar Holding Space. We're very excited to welcome Dr. Eliana Gil, who's with us today. Welcome this morning, this afternoon and this evening, wherever you're coming in from. Lovely to see your faces. It's a nice early start, particularly for those of us on the East Coast who have given up daylight savings. It's probably a little bit darker and a little bit colder where you are, so well done for getting up nice and early for this. It's lovely to see you. And this is really the purpose of this webinar series, Holding Space, to be able to look after ourselves and to find ways that we can better look after those around us. So I'd like to welcome you all here again today. My name's Jackie Short. I'm the Director of Sydney Centre for Creative Change, and we run a series of face-to-face and online training programs and webinars in creative therapies. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm coming to you from today, the Eora people of the Gadigal Nation, and pay our collective respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands that you're sitting on today, wherever you happen to be. This series that we have in Holding Space, we'll be looking at holding space for self and also holding space for others. And the plan today is to do a couple of things. Primarily what we're going to be doing is listening to and asking questions of Dr. Gil when she comes on board. But when she's not going to be able to stay with us for the whole hour and a half. So when she leaves, please stay on board, because there's two other resources that I'd like to share with you that you might find of value in the work that you do with children, with families and with adults as well. So stay on board for those. I know many of you would know Dr. Eliana Gil. She is a registered play therapy supervisor, a registered art therapist, and has a doctorate in family therapy. She's worked in the field of child abuse prevention and treatment throughout her professional career, which is over 40 years. And now semi-retired, she's still teaching, consulting and supervising, with a particular passion for play and other expressive therapies like sound, drama and art therapy. Eliana shares her time with 4 beautiful grandchildren, is a continual learner and happy to connect over Zoom like she's very generously doing here with us today. So Eliana, welcome. It's lovely to see you.
Good. Shall I just get started?
Yes, please.
Okay. So basically, good morning, everyone, to you. And my thought today was that I would just kind of talk a little bit about the situation we're all in and all the stress that we're sharing, and try to give you some ideas and mostly have a dialogue about how to support each other. And I'm going to talk a little bit about telehealth because most of us are now moving to that. And then I'll have a little Q&A at the end and just check in and see if there's anything else that I can help you with. Pretty much everything that I am going to say I have in writing. So I'm going to send it to Jackie after we talk, and you'll have that. Hopefully she can share it with people. And in particular, I'm sending you some resources for people that I know are producing lots of helpful materials, so you can get online and hopefully get that. Before we get started, I thought we'd take just 1 minute and do a little exercise together. And so what I'd like you to do is to kind of pause for a second, just check in. I know it's, again, early in the morning for you. I'm just at the end of my day. So just kind of take stock of where you are right this particular moment in time, how you're feeling. And then what I'd like you to do when I say 3 is show me that feeling with a sound and a movement. So no words, just a sound and a movement. Okay? So just kind of check in for a second, see what you're feeling, and then I'm going to count to 3 and then just show me. And hopefully you can watch the screen when everybody does this, okay? So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, go. Great. And I'll probably check in at the end of this time and see where that is again. But just wanted to connect and say hello. And again, have this sense that we are always with our feelings. And no matter what we do, we kind of bring with us whatever it is we have. So this is a time of a lot of stress and distress for a lot of the families that we're working with. I think we're all feeling this in very idiosyncratic ways. For myself, for example, I've been really noticing in the last 2 weeks that my grief is a little bit percolating. It's a little bit activated. I had a series of pretty significant losses in the last few years, and that had been, evolving. I don't think grief ever just stops, but it was starting to take its place, and then suddenly this situation that we're in started, and all of a sudden everything is rumbling inside, and so it's been sad, and I found myself crying at times, watching the news and crying for the people that we don't see, their names we don't hear, and yet knowing that people are sick, they're dying, and people are getting better too, which is something to celebrate. But I think for all of us, we're feeling it in so many different ways. And then I start thinking about the families that we work with, and of course, people with histories of trauma are probably being triggered in so many ways right now. And I do think there's an affective bridge that happens, so that in moments where we feel helplessness or despair or fear or confusion, we tend to go to other times when we felt these things. And so I think that's what's happening right now, is that people are feeling triggered off by all of the events that are going on. And the other situation that's really in my heart a lot is, having worked a lot with interpersonal violence, just knowing that the risk factors have really increased for children who have histories of physical abuse, and for women sometimes who are exposed to situations of violence. And so, even though it's wonderful to see all the things that are being shared online about families doing things together and singing songs, and I'm so happy to see that. I experienced that even with my grandchildren. But at the same time, I worry that this imposed togetherness is not being felt by everyone in the same way, and that there are situations of danger or high risk that might exist. And so I know that personally, I heard from 2 former clients in the past week, and just spent a lot of time with them, acknowledging the danger they're in, talking about potential escape routes, talking about what inside the house could feel potentially safe, and could include locked doors, and could include, a 911 call to people, but just making sure that people are really acknowledging their own reality and continuing to work towards reaching out and having resources for themselves. So, but that weighs heavy, I think, on a lot of us. Having said all that, I think that as we begin to move to telehealth and working online with clients, which I assume most of you are doing, are most people in your country doing this at this point, moving to telehealth sessions? Okay, great. I was wondering if that was the case. And I think that one of the things that we can work with is our attitude and our preparation. And so I've been suggesting to people to really expect some pleasant surprises, because that's what I'm hearing from people all across the country, is just this idea that, oh my gosh, I've been working with this child, and all of a sudden, because we're online, he felt more open, or he felt that he had that safe enough distance that we think we're providing in a play therapy office, but this is actually a little bit graduated distance. And for some people, that felt really, really good. And so anticipating that, yes, there may be some sort of learning curve and some difficulty, but at the same time, not to forget to look for and anticipate that there could be some pleasant surprises. I think that, again, really important to just acknowledge that those of you who are therapists right now are providing the help that you typically offer, but you're doing it in a totally different context in which there are tons of demands on you. And so you may have worries for your family, you may have friends that you know who are sick, you may have difficulty with just negotiating having the kids at home and working, or trying to figure out how you're going to do everything. So it's a really odd time, because for all of us who are used to providing, sort of advice or trying to be of help, we're trying to I heard the little puppy there. We're trying to negotiate a safe place for ourselves, and so that it's kind of can be a burdensome thing to do as well. So that leads me to the fact that one of the biggest suggestions that I have for everyone today is just self-care, and how critical that's going to be at this moment in time. I'm working a lot with supervisees, and what I'm hearing the most is that there's a lot of fatigue going on, that somehow doing this online makes people more tired. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and I think that in part it's that we're putting out more energy. It's a little bit more energy to teach online than it is to teach with people, where you're getting feedback, kind of direct eye-to-eye feedback. So I know that, for example, for me, I always feel like I have to energize myself a little bit. And so that can be fatiguing. I happen to enjoy it, but for some people who may not be as comfortable with that, it can really make them tired. And the other thing is we're not moving. So we're really restricted to the camera, and we're restricted usually to sitting in place. And that's not something that we do usually when we're working in play therapy. So I'm suggesting, in drama therapy, oftentimes actors and actresses, when they're performing, after they're in a role, which I kind of think that the therapist is a role that we kind of take on and live, but that when we're in role afterwards, to make sure you shake it off. And that's what actors do. They shake off the role so that they go home and they leave whatever, conflict or tension or whatever might be occurring in that role in the actual stage, let's say. And so shaking it out really means doing exactly what you think it does. You start with your head and you shake your entire body, and you do that between sessions. And that creates a little bit of movement, but it also has this kind of metaphor of you need to really shake off all the things that you just offered to hold for people. And that's our job, right? That's always been kind of one of the things that we do, is we hold these things for people. Just as an aside, I retired a few years back from working with clients. And that's one of the things that I noticed probably 6 months into retirement, was how much lighter I felt, that I wasn't going to bed thinking, I hope that the judge agrees with me, or I hope that child's going to be okay tonight, or I hope that parent stops drinking, or whatever it may be, that you're holding these things. And I think we all learn to compartmentalize, but sometimes we take it and we hold it and we don't release it. And I think that process of releasing it, like through a shakeout, is a really good idea. And the other thing I used to do a lot of, almost daily, was something called countertransference art. And that's when you just take a big piece of paper and you put lines and colors and shapes and words and images. You just let it all go. And you do that after every session. And I always found that a very valuable thing to do. Then I would fold it up and put it in my file of all my countertransference drawings, and then I'd go home. Because if I didn't take that little step to transition and to acknowledge that the work that we do can be heavy, I tended to take it home. And I'll tell you, my kids could read me as I walked in the door, so they'd say, oh, you had a bad day today, or, something. They could see it. And so you hold it in your body, you hold it in your heart and your soul. So I think it's really important to just keep checking in with yourself. This is a time where people need to consider whether it might be useful to do every other week instead of every week, or it might be important with certain kids to see them more than once a week, or it might be important to do smaller sessions. There are some highly dysregulated children who are really struggling with 50-minute sessions online. So you might want to consider shrinking it and maybe doing a smaller period of time, if that's possible. And some people are choosing to do smaller sessions twice a week rather than a full session once a week. I think this is a time to think about sending cards and notes to your clients, sending little stickers, sending little kind of just notes so that the connection is staying, because I do think this is a period of isolation. I think that even though we can go out, I go for a walk with my dog 3 times a day, but it still feels different. So as I'm walking down the street, if someone's coming towards me, they tend to cross the street. And in the past, we used to tend to chat about the dogs. How old are they? What do they like to eat? That kind of stuff. So it does feel like an isolating experience. And for some people more than others, that's going to, again, trigger a lot of feelings, sometimes abandonment or loss or rejection or whatever it may be. So I did want to say that I do think it's important to kind of consider that as much as you continue to do this, you might want to do it in different ways, if that makes sense to you. I also think that in terms of working with children and families online, this is a process of rediscovering each other. I thought it was really funny. I was working with a colleague of mine, and she was saying how the child asked her to come closer to the screen, and she was thinking, oh, that's so nice. The child wants me closer. It turned out the child was trying to count her wrinkles. She said that was really disconcerting because everything's magnified. And I just thought that was funny. I think that things like that will happen where you're seeing each other really big now, especially not in this gallery view, but when you're actually working with a child, you get to see them really big. All kinds of things are happening. We had a little child the other day with one of our therapists who just turned the camera off. And I thought that was funny. And she was a little bit like disconcerted and wanted him to turn the camera back on. And my thing with anything like that is just go with the flow and be flexible, and then just say, okay, I'll turn my camera off too. And then let's play a guessing game. Let's try to figure out what I know, I'll make a sound and you tell me what the sound is. Or I'll make a sound with something in the room and you tell me what you think I'm making that sound with. In other words, go with it. Never get into a power struggle, because she lost, excuse me, probably 15 minutes of time because she didn't know what to do. The other thing that was funny, just in terms of my stuff I've been doing online, is the other day I was working and the thing kept freezing. And there's nothing worse than that, right? When it starts glitching up and it freezes. And then I was getting really frustrated. I could feel it, I could feel it in my shoulders, and, I was just, getting frustrated. And so I decided that what I would do is I would just keep talking, and then I would freeze. And then I would say to people, so was that me who froze, or was that the technology? And all I'm saying is that sometimes we just have to go with the flow and just try to make this as playful as we can, and not let things affect us. I was actually mad with myself that I let that get under my skin, because stuff like that is going to happen. It comes with the territory. I also think that kids are much more familiar with this platform than we are. They're on it all the time, both at school and at home. And so they're going to come on it with a sense of novelty, not so much about getting on the platform, but getting on the platform with you. And so this is a time where I think it would be really a good idea to just say, this is really different for me. I don't ever go online like this. So I'm hoping you can help me out here and kind of show me around. And, I'm wondering if what you imagined we would do here together, because nothing's coming to my mind. And let the child lead the way. Kids are really nice when you give them that opportunity to kind of teach. They love it. And also to be a co-therapist in a way. I have always used this strategy where I make up a client that's extremely similar to the child in front of me. And so I will say to the child, well, you're about 10, right? And you're in what grade? And they tell me the grade, and I go, oh my gosh, I was just meeting with another 10-year-old. I think he's in exactly the same grade as you. And nothing seemed to work. I didn't know what to ask him. I didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to do. And I'm just thinking, maybe because you're that age, you would know. Maybe you have a tip for him or a tip for me, so that I might better help him. And sometimes kids really get into that, especially if there's a problem that's the same. And remember how you've been really worried at times? That's what he is struggling with. And I just am clueless about how to help him. And when you do that, you sort of engage that mastery component of, yeah, I got some ideas for you. And so that can go really well. And I guess I'm hoping I'm conveying this thing about just try to be flexible, try to go where they go, and try to see that there's benefits to almost anything that can happen here online. So letting them take the lead. The other thing is a little bit more preparation is required for this. That's what I'm noticing, and that's what I'm talking about with the therapists that work with us. First of all, just the whole online thing. So if you're not familiar with it, although many people, I've been doing Zoom probably since 2013, just for teaching consulting purposes, but a lot of people have never been on it. So they don't know even how to sign on. So there's a range of experience, but I do think if you're not feeling comfortable, call your friends and family, get them online. Let them see how just kind of experiment and explore together what it's like, and see all the features that you can do here with Zoom. There's some really interesting things that you might be able to do. You can share a screen and show kids pictures. You can share a screen and show them little YouTube clips. There's all kinds of really creative people. A little bit, this is outside of my experience in terms of technology, but I have a whole younger group of folks for whom technology is just another sort of way that they connect with kids. And of course, they're responding to the fact that kids are so focused on technology. And so there's a lot of things you can learn. I check in with my granddaughter. Luckily, she lives upstairs, so I see her all the time, but I check in with her when like this TikTok thing. The other day, somebody said something about TikToks, and I thought they were talking about that little thing you chew on. And it wasn't. It was like this whole other thing. And so I had to ask her what that was about. So it just happens that kids kind of are more, they've got their hands more in this. So the preparation of calling other people and also practicing online with a child that's not your client. So if you got nieces or nephews, or some of the neighbors have kids, those kids are bored right now too. My granddaughter actually offered to help anybody who needed to practice online, because she's great at just kind of following directives, and she enjoys almost everything. But all of us have kids like that we can call on right now and just kind of practice. The other thing is there's lots of webinars on telehealth for free that are coming out. So those things are useful. So just kind of knowing again where the resources are. And as I said, when I started, I'll be sending you like 5 names. There are people who have really gone on overdrive. They've got a list of 70 things you can do on telehealth and things like that. So that's great. And I love that that's there. And I also really hope that people can tap into themselves first, and kind of knowing what you know about the client you're working with and the relationship that you have. You're the one who best knows what makes your clients laugh, and you know what they get sad about, what they get worried about, things that have worked, things that haven't worked. So hopefully at times just letting your own creative juices go and coming up with something that might work with the family that you're seeing. I do think it's nice sometimes. I do wake up some days and just have nothing to say. And when that happens, it's really interesting to find a list of things and go, oh, that's a great idea. I think if I tweak it this way or that way, I can do that with a family that I've been working with. So just kind of counting on yourself a little bit. And this is kind of my closing statement, which I will say again then, but it's not so much about what you're doing, it's about being with. And all you're doing right now is being with in a different way. And it's a way that you can co-create. So, you might have an experience with one kid where you're completely child-centered and just watching what they do, and the child's coming in and going, and look what I have in my room, and look what I like to play with. And you're doing the reflective listening, the empathic listening. You're basically being child-centered. But there may be another child that isn't going to be as exploratory with you. And for those children, you may need to invite them to do one thing or another. And that's always been my language, is my invitations are ample. People always say to me, well, what about the child that doesn't want to do that? And I always say, well, you go to something else. And what is that something else? I don't know. It depends on what comes to mind when you're working with that child. Some of it's very spontaneous. It's created in the moment. It's also a reflection of the therapy you're doing. You might end up with a child using a metaphor, and until that moment, it had never occurred to you to do a particular activity with that metaphor. And so there is a spontaneity that we all, I think, count on, that I think we need to continue, but at the same time establishing some foundation so that you feel competent to do what you're doing. I think a lot of my colleagues are sharing with me anyway that they just feel so nervous and they just feel so inadequate. And you know, that's what happens with anything new. And it takes a little while and you have to practice. And so that's where I think the preparation can really come in. And also preparing with the families. For example, things like, where is the child or the family going to be to have this therapy? They're going to be in a bedroom, in a living room, in a bathroom. I mean, where are they going to place their camera? Well, hopefully not a bathroom, something else. But when you know that, then it's kind of like talking about boundaries and talking about how wherever that room is, that should be the same place every time. And in addition to that, there should be some privacy for the child. And there should be a parent willing to support the therapy by keeping other kids out of the room, by helping in whatever way to support the therapy process. I also think that a basket or a clothes hamper or anything, a box that a parent and a child together can fill with things that will be available to the therapy hour, I think that would be a great idea. And here, you know, something that the child chooses, like a toy that they feel close to, or, you know, you can say to them, what in your room gives you a feeling of comfort, a feeling of just safety, like you can take a deep breath and just kind of be there. What in the room does that for you? And then you would find something that does that, and have the child use that sort of as an anchor. But there may also be things that you can ask the family to do together to support the child's therapy. And I'll give you some examples of those things. You can ask them to go on a nature walk and pick rocks and stones and sticks and pine cones, whatever might be available out there. And right now, of course, you have to bring it in and disinfect it and then dry it out. But that may be something that becomes available for little projects that you do, little art activities that you do. The other day, one of our therapists had these rocks, and everyone in the family painted a rock for the little boy. And also on that rock said a trait that they love about that child. So it was funny or playful or smart or athletic or whatever. And they wrote it on the little rock and painted it and then gave it as a gift to the child. So the child took in a little basket all those little rocks. And this is a child who needs that, needs to see that the family sees him, values him, and supports him. But that's a family activity that then becomes something that anchors the child into the therapy process. And I was thinking of another thing. Besides that, and another possibility might be for the entire family to cut out pictures from magazines or newspapers for collage and doing collage work. And so again, it's something that the family does together, which is wonderful, but it also sends the message, we support you, to the child. And then you can ask the child to do some particular collage work. Right now, you know, one of the things I think might be most useful is having the child make a collage about what stays the same during this period of quarantine or whatever, and what's different. And just have them look at the variability of the things that do get carried over and the things that are left behind. And so I think that brings up for kids a lot of the things they miss, a lot of the things that they're worried about, you know, the people that are important to them, et cetera, et cetera. It might be a really good time for the family to put together a list of, or even pictures or drawings of everyone they miss and put them on a poster board somewhere in the house and keep adding to it, so that, you know, there's this attempt to keep the connections going, especially those that are supportive systems for the child and for the family. The other thing is, if you're preparing for these sessions in a particular place, to make sure you have a way to text or call the mom or whoever's there as a caregiver in case the child needs assistance. So the other day we had a child playing hide and seek over telehealth and got himself locked in the closet. And so that's what it was like. Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And it's like, you need to get the parent to come in and let the child out. Stuff like that's going to happen. Oh, and another thing I think is relevant is with the parent to go through the room and make sure it's safe, that there aren't any sharp objects, that there aren't places that the child could get into and that something might not hurt him. And so discussing safety, I think, is important as well. In addition, in that basket to what might be toys or objects, families have limited resources at times, and they may not have a lot of toys to go into this basket. So I think there's a lot of household items that can go in there. Things like perhaps balloons. And even if your kids don't have balloons, maybe you could send a couple via an envelope to them, because balloons are really great for a lot of different things. You can play with them. I've seen people use them as drumming instruments. There's lots of activities you can do with the families with balloons. So it might be good for them to have. Also, little cotton balls that they can blow into each other's hands. And in a family session, that's so much fun to just pass the cotton ball around, or to have them in dyads. These are TheraPlay activities. As a matter of fact, TheraPlay right now is being utilized widely because there's all these little attachment-based ideas between parents and children. And that's a really important thing too that I will mention, is that this is a great opportunity to invite the family to participate in some way. Sometimes we don't have that luxury. There's one parent bringing a child and they have to go pick up another one while the child's in therapy. Here you have everybody. So if you've ever wondered what the sibling relationship looks like, maybe they can be invited in for a session. If you want to promote or strengthen the attachment between parent and child, this might be a good time to experiment with that. And there's so many simple, lovely things you can do. For example, in TheraPlay, there's this little, this is a tissue, but imagine it's a cotton ball. But there's a little simple technique where the parent and the child turn towards each other, and then they're asked to paint a mask on each other, taking turns on the faces. And so they're using a cotton ball, and it can be a rabbit's nose and then little whiskers, and it can be a butterfly with a butterfly wings, or it could be a variety of different things. But what's so beautiful to watch is it creates moments of connection and tenderness between people. Usually, I have seen some children who will draw a witch face on their parent, and that's a whole other other type of session. But for the most part, asking them to do a little kitty cat or a little rabbit or something that they draw on each other's face is very tender. And the first step is, of course, that they have to face each other. And for some parents and children, that's something that gets ignored during the day. So again, simple ways of helping families connect to each other. The mirroring that I just did with you earlier, well, actually that wasn't so much mirroring as more like charades. Show me with a sound and a movement what you're feeling. But you can also play emotional charades with families or between yourself and the child, where you go, I'm going to show you an emotion, like that's pride. And then you guess what it is. And now it's my turn. You show me something and I can guess what it is. I had another colleague who, when the child was showing like anger or fear or sadness, and was really embodying the emotion really well, she was taking a picture of it. And then she printed those pictures out and then sent them in an envelope to the child. And so the child now has something where he can point at a feeling if he doesn't feel like showing that. And you can do that with the whole family. I've always liked doing that, having the whole family show me what anger looks like. And then playing with it too, so that you can, if somebody does anger or frustration and they do like this, they go, and I go to them, okay, so on a scale of 0 to 10, where would you put, And they say, well, it's about a 2. And I say, okay, can you turn the volume up to about a 4? And then they'll go, and I go, okay, that was a 4. Do you think you can go as far as 6? And then they'll go, I won't do it because I don't, I don't want you to hear me too loud, but they can do 6. And then you go, wow, that's amazing. Now bring it back to 2. And that's about co-regulation, but it's also about affective windows, right? How to express, how to show different levels. And if you help them with that, eventually anytime, like they'll come into the room and they're maybe high energy, you can say, wow, your energy level's really high today. Where would you put it on a scale of 0 to 10? Well, it's a 9. And I go, okay, so it's a 9. So let's see how that goes, having a 9 energy level in this room on this particular format. And you might ask them to turn the volume down. And so kids can learn to do that, and they can learn to play with it. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of something. A lot of people have never heard of it, but I love it. It's called biodots, B-I-O dots, D-O-T-S. And there's a website called www.biodots.com. Anyway, I just want to mention that these little things are things that, like, I'll be working with a very, very high energy child. I don't like to use words like oppositional and, you know, I don't know. I just like to call them really high energy kids. And I'll say to the child, wow, that you are really high energy today. I'm wondering if you want to see what color that energy is. And then they put the little bio dots. They're just these little circles. They're like mood rings from the 60s. And you put them here between your thumb and pointer finger. And then you wait a few seconds and it actually turns a color. And I forget what high energy is, but kids that are really activated, but it's a color. And then I say to kids, I'm wondering if you would be interested in changing that color. I have a way to change that color just by thinking about something different. Do you want to try it? Do you want to check it out? And they're usually, yeah, really interested. And so then we go ahead and do that, and the color changes. So if any of you are interested, you can actually send them a few of these biodots and from time to time pull them out because they can be interesting. We used to use these at staff meetings a lot when we were going to discuss the budget. And it was pretty interesting because everybody went to, I think it was a bright green, which I think was high stress or whatever when we were talking about monies. But anyway, so just kind of the idea of having some things that you've sent to the kids maybe, or some tools that you can use, but not to feel limited by not having props, because you are the biggest prop you have. You know, and things you can do online to interest kids or get them invested in what you're doing, I think abound. I think I mentioned to trust the therapy relationship. I think that's the foundation that you've built already. And given that that foundation is strong, you will be able to move from that and just always keep going back to the foundation. If the foundation's not as stable, you know, if this is a new client, or I have some therapists now who are starting therapy online. So this is going to be a little challenging because the foundation doesn't already exist. Then you go back to, what are your usual ways of connecting with people? What are your usual ways of trying to build therapy relationships? And so I think it's going to cause us all to think a little bit out of the box. But if you do know that there are rituals that you were using in prior therapy, this is a good time to just transfer those over. So if you had a routine of listening to a chime ring at the beginning, or checking in, sitting down and just checking in, or whatever you did, try to do it now and try to have a beginning and an end so that it punctuates the therapy and whatever work you're doing sort of in the middle. I'm almost done with my written script here, and then I will open it up for questions and answers. Yeah, and it might also be important to have a transitional object in place so that between sessions, if the kids have something on their mind that they would really like to share, or they think about you in the context of that, to give them some way to document that. So it might be a journal, it might be some asking them to write it on pieces of construction paper. It might be a toy that they used to used when they were working with you and they have something similar, but to have something that feels kind of like a transitional object that they can hold on to when you're not there. I think journaling is great if kids can do that. Little kids who don't like to or don't write as much, have them draw a picture of it, a picture that reminds them of what it was that was on their mind so that you can go over it with them. Some kids are very used to and like books. This is a great time to do book reading on the phone, and or to have the kids reading you the books that they're interested in. It could also be a time of writing a book together, you know, about something, maybe just how to help other kids through the coronavirus period. So there's so many different creative things that you can do. I think that in terms of what we're trying to provide, it's continuity of care. And that means continuity of connection. And that includes creativity and imagination. How do we get this to happen in a different way, in an alternative way that can include some playfulness and some creativity, as I said, and novelty. A lot of this is going to be novel, at least initially. I don't know what will happen as time goes by. The kids will probably have ways to manifest that they're not excited about this, just as they did sometimes in therapy. And they're going to be good sessions and not so good sessions, meaning the child's going to be more present and more available than other times. And that happens in regular therapy sessions as well. Let's see. Oh, I think I mentioned already to try to use some time to augment your resources. And I think I mentioned YouTube games and online games. It turns out you can also play a game online with a child at the same time, so in vivo. And so there might be some of those games that you can put on your computer and learn how to use. I watched somebody do, oh, how to describe this, a virtual sand tray yesterday online, and I haven't learned it yet, but apparently you can go and share the screen and pick objects and then have the clients pick what they want to put in. And so, for example, this person wanted to put in a fire, so the person typed in fire and all these images popped up, and you take the fire and you put it into the sandbox. It was fascinating. I don't know how to do it yet, but I applaud the effort to try something different. I also just ordered online something where someone has made a ton of little tiny pictures that'll stand up in your sand tray if you like to do sand tray. I have, and you can't see it from here, I've always had a nature sand tray. And so I collect in these little cups seeds and sticks and shells and stones and everything. And I've been always used to making sand trays just using objects from nature. This is a great time to go through your attics and look at old buttons, and or if you've collected things from Michael's, you know, like crystal beads, or actually people who beaded for a long time and now they don't use those beads. All those things can become relevant and useful as something that stands for something else. And if you ask people to take a second and look around, just look around their belongings and see what gives them a sense of comfort. People are going to, this is mine, by the way, I'll show it to you. But people are going to come up, it's a beautiful tree. And people are going to come up with things because that's what you do with your rooms, right? You fill them with little objects that give you comfort and that you really enjoy. So everyone is likely going to have something like that. And so I'm going to just do a little closure, and the little closure is, and some of these are repetitions, but don't feel so much pressure. Give yourself a break about coming up with all these ideas and activities. Because the reality is it's not about that. It's really about being with in a flexible, creative way, following the child's lead, seeing what comes up for you as a result of being with this child that you might be able to introduce. So having a focus for sure, looking at what your goals are, what you're trying to promote with kids. Some of the goals that you had in the past may be exacerbated right now. If you had a child who came in to see you because of anxiety, right now the anxiety is coming from the outside, so it might be exacerbated. So reviewing with the child what we had found out so far about what helps you with your worries, and then trying to add to that as time goes by. The self-care. I don't think I can say it too much, but I think that this is a really critical time for all of us to be able to do what we tell our clients to do. You know, if you could just listen to yourself, telling your clients, take care of yourself, know your resources, stay, you know, we're all doing it. If you could just turn that to yourself and then try to follow through, because you're equally important. And to be honest, if you get depleted, you're not going to be of use to anyone. So you really have to keep working with yourself. And just to remember the co-creative part of this, that, you know, it's not all on them, it's not all on you, it's something that's happening in the context of the relationship that you have. So I wish you the best with everything that's going on. And I will now open it for some comments or questions or anything that's on your mind that we might be able to have a dialogue about.
Thank you so much, Eliana. That's a wonderful presentation, so timely, and a wonderful reminder about the preeminence of self-care before we're looking after others, but so many practical ideas. And we've had lots of comments and chats just saying how wonderful this has been and how helpful. So, but we have had a few questions coming through. So would you prefer me to ask you these so you don't have to look at the box, or would you rather do that?
I just actually forget that that's a feature here. I always have to be reminded that people are talking to me this way. So I can look over here, but yes, definitely in foster care. I mean, this is, most of our clients are kids that are in foster care. Again, the preparatory piece of that is important for children to be able to have the support of the foster parents, for you to do a little bit of coaching with the foster parents about how to be particularly helpful to the kids, and then also just making sure all those boundaries are in place, that there's some kind of general agreement that we're going to meet and keep supporting the child in this way, that you may call on the foster parent to participate in at some times, and that there may be some homework assignments that you give to the child to do with his family. All of those things can be done, and definitely, as long as, I mean, most of the Department of Family Services where we work have given us carte blanche. They've said telehealth is just as, I mean, that works for us. They're basically paying the fees the same way they have. They haven't asked us to discount fees or anything like that. And the sessions are going on as scheduled, as the kids can actually, in some ways, the flexibility of the schedule has made it easier to work with the foster families or the adoptive parents or the birth parents or whoever is available. So definitely don't feel restricted by the fact that they're in foster care. However, you may need to be sure that you're working with the social worker and that, you know, everything's going well. Okay, let me just go through. Yes, there's some wonderful, there's one call that on someone's commenting, telehealth for play therapists, just incredible. I mean, I am so proud of my peeps. I call them my peeps, my play therapists. I mean, they have just gone above and beyond. So there's something called teleplay therapy you can get on. And again, I'm sending you the names of the ones that are my favorites. And after I hang up, I will send you this script, but also something, there's a woman, oh, let me see. Her name is Lauren Elizabeth, and she has been pulling together a master list of a whole ton of resources, and I love it. I don't know who she is, but I am so grateful to her, and I will send that to you unless you already have it and you're working with it, but I was really impressed by what she was able to put together. You all are sweet. I'm just looking at some of the compliments. Okay, let me just keep going. Children with disabilities. Again, it depends on the type of disability that children have. It depends on if you're using someone, for example, as an interpreter with a child who may be hearing impaired. If you've got kids, we have a couple of kids who come in wheelchairs. The sitting is actually not that different for them. Again, talking about what's going to stay the same as we meet in this particular way for therapy and what's going to be different. And how do we support those differences or make them easier or facilitate something that might be positive. So in terms of that question, I'm not quite sure. I would have to think about that a little bit more if there would be some restrictions, but I think sometimes they're more self-imposed. I think if you are already working with individuals who have physical limitations or any kind of limitations, you probably already know how to do it. It's just a question of how you translate it to do it online, if that's at all possible. Yeah, selectively mute children. Now that's a really interesting thing. I love to work with children who don't use words because that's very comfortable for me. And so I would always start a session by saying, so I know you don't like to use words and we don't have to use words, but imagine all the things you could do without words. You know, so you could mute yourself and just watch the child do what the child does, see what the child brings to you. You might be able to, the child listens, right? So you might be able to read a book to them. You might be able to draw parallel pictures and then show them your picture and have them show you, they will show you the picture they make. And in terms of this, I'm usually pretty silent with kids and they get used to that. And then suddenly they start making, in my experience, suddenly they start making sounds, and these can be like a car sound or an ambulance sound, or, you know, they start grunting or whatever. And then I start sort of noticing that the room is filling with the sounds. And then, you know, the parent calls me and says, the child started talking today at home, or the child saying a few words at school. And if that's happening, I don't ever need to hear the child speak. That's not my agenda. My agenda is just to kind of help the child and support the child to be successful in the world. And most of the time when kids are brought and they're not speaking in school, it becomes a problem to the teachers and it becomes a problem in terms of peer relationships. So we're trying to support them, but you first have to understand what that's all about and why they need that kind of control in this particular way. And so working with the family is equally important. But yeah, so for me, I think I would enjoy that, but I think you might try to make the session a little bit smaller if it's uncomfortable to you or uncomfortable to the child. So I'm trying to go through these questions. If there's anything I'm skipping over that I can talk about, please, Jackie, if you can help me, because mine keeps scrolling to the top and then I lose it. TheraPlay has worked best for me at this time. Someone's saying, Sarah, and I agree 100%. I also think, and I was talking to my partner at Gil Institute, that after this is all over, we may have to leave open the telehealth option, because there's some families who are saying, this is so great that I don't have to drive an hour to go see you, or that they're just feeling like it just takes a lot of the pressure off. And so, you know, if it's feasible, if we seem to be able to make progress, I think it's going to be really an interesting thing to do. Let me see. Would one be more working on the reason for the referral or focusing on the current changes? I think you do both. I think that right now, as I said, if you have the presenting problem as anxiety and you've been working on that, all this stuff that's happening is just exacerbating the anxiety. So in a way, you're talking about how do you create some safety and resources and regulation in the moment in this family, and that's important. And at the same time, what do we already know about trying to work with your worries? What have you already learned about self-soothing and self-comforting? So it's a kind of a review of where you have been, plus how those skills could apply now. Things like turning the TV off might be really necessary. Some people, that's the other thing I forgot to say, is people have narratives about the coronavirus in their families. And so for some parents, they want their kids to know everything and they're very anxious, and they can convey anxiety to their kids about stepping outside the door or whatever. There are other parents who don't want their kids to know anything about it, because they think if the kids know about it, they're going to get really nervous. And so that whole issue of how parents protect their kids, and there may be a neglectful parent who just isn't really paying attention to the kids at all. So depending on that narrative in the family, it's going to be important to address that and acknowledge it, and acknowledge what the narrative is. Like with my former client who called, you know, it was really important just to acknowledge this is super dangerous time for you. You know, like it's uncomfortable and stressful for everybody else, but for you, potentially traumatic. So we have to work in a different way to think about how to keep you safe. And then, of course, after that, it was like, oh my gosh, I felt heaviness in my chest going to sleep and knowing that, you know, I remember this family so well, and this is a mom who has done really well to protect herself, but now this abusive person is in the home all the time, which is fine as long as he's not drinking, but his drinking is related to the stress that's going on. So it's just complicated and deeply complicated for some people more than other people. Okay, just keep going here. Yeah, some can prefer to email because the face-to-face is too stressful. You know, I'm encouraging people, if this is too much, you might want to, excuse me while I try to do that, you might just want to talk profile, or you might just want to turn the whole thing around and just do back-to-back. Just experiment if it's too intense this way. The other day, it was really funny. I was working with somebody online, and I was trying to communicate that you have to narrow the focus. And I found myself doing this and kind of, you know, narrowing the focus, but using it like a camera so that you have to fine tune it, make sure. And the person said, your eyeball looks so big. And I had to laugh because I felt like I was really peering into their world as it were. And it was pretty funny. Is anyone else finding that you're losing your voice? Definitely. Yeah. And that might suggest you're talking too much, A, or B, not drinking enough water. So remember, as a public speaker, I'm saying that, and I drank all my water before I came here. As a public speaker, you always want to drink water and just keep yourself moist, because otherwise your vocal cords get strained. So, you know, all these are little kind of tricks of the trade. Have a little lozenge nearby if that starts happening. It's very interesting how, you know, just moving to something that's new just produces all these little challenges. Self-care strategies. I would love to open that up. I love walking outside. I love, I'm taking courses online right now because I love that. I love learning. So I've been taking a drama therapy course online, which I was really like worried that it was going to be, oh, how are we going to do this like this? And it's been awesome. So I'm kind of really enjoying. Every mental health professional that I work with has a different way they do it. So some people like to do paintings. Oh, you know, the other thing I would really encourage you to do is mandalas. Mandalas are where you have the circle and then you fill it in, and you just use markers or pencils or pastels. The other day, I was trying to think out of the box because I make mandalas almost daily. And all you do is use a regular sized dinner plate, put it down, trace it, and you've got a perfect mandala. And then you just fill it in and you let yourself, I don't know how many of you do this already, but you just let your hands guide you, and you can start in the center and then just see where it takes you. And you're never restricted by the circle. You know, you can definitely go outside the lines. And so right now what I'm finding is that my mandalas are like not inside the circle, they're almost outside the circle all the time because I'm feeling so constricted all the time. But the other day I wanted to do something different, so I went through my spice rack and I took out mustard, which is yellow, and cumin, which is red, and, you know, cinnamon, which is brown, and dill weed, which is green. And I put them all on a plate, and I started using a little brush and just made this incredible mandala on a plate. And I was so proud of myself, you know. So things like that, I think, can be very nurturing to ourselves. It also brings a sense of mastery, you know. I was so excited, I put it on Facebook. And so a lot of people said, this is so cool. And so it's nice to try different things. And the other thing I would suggest is try finishing things that you've been working, have hanging around the house that you said, oh, one of these days I'm going to finish. And there's something about doing something that has a beginning, middle, and an end that can be really useful. So those are some of the self-care things that I do. If you have a sand tray around the house, that might be a good thing to do too. I used to do countertransfer sand trays all the time. Let's see. Some people, is there anything else that's on here that I have missed? Oh, wait, one other thing, one cohort is in a bit of a dead zone for internet coverage. Yeah. Your advice when technology fails. I would plan ahead with clients about technology and just say, look, this freezes. Sometimes we get disconnected. I will call you back. Or you can call, well, usually it's you calling them back. You know, the phone, sometimes you're going to have to come and just use a telephone if you can do that. And sometimes the session might end abruptly and there's no way to be back in connection. And tell people if something happens, I'll write you a note so that we have some closure. And then say, I'm really sorry about this. There are glitches in this. We were just starting to talk about something really important. I heard what you said. That's something maybe you can think about, and we'll talk about it next time. Maybe you want to draw a picture of something that's related to that because you're good at expressing yourself that way, or something like that. But just to have some closure. The closure piece, I think, is probably the most important one. Yeah, I mean, yeah, phone calls. And a lot of kids aren't used to being on the phone. That's another kind of interesting things. Um, any suggestions for telehealth referring to feeling overwhelmed for back-to-back sessions? Yeah, again, I just think we might have to make them a little bit smaller, the sessions. So, you know, try to give yourself a little bit of time in between, try to shake it out, try to do some movement, try to go outside and get some fresh air, have some kind of change of environment before you come back and try to be available to someone else. I wish I had more to offer on that, but I just think that it's something we're going to have to figure out what's going to work for each of us. And you might have to, you know, do 3 sessions and schedule an hour free, and then not force yourself to do one back to back to back. I always encourage that anyway when we were doing our regular work, and because I just think that sometimes it can be overwhelming. And so, you know, the in-between thing and the rushing and, you know, trying to get the room ready, at least there's some things we're not having to do right now. You don't have to clean up after a 3-year-old who's just dumped everything in your room. So there maybe is a little tiny silver lining. Okay, so yes, mandalas are beautiful. A cooking show with a mandala cheesecake. So great, great. So I think that we've been doing well. I'm going to end my part here because I know you might have a little bit more time together, but I'd like to do that exercise we did at the beginning and then one additional one. So again, now it's almost an hour later, and I'd like you to just tap in and just see how you're feeling at this moment in time. And then I would like, when I say 3, for you just to show me with a sound and a movement, and try to see as many of your colleagues as you can. So 1, 2, 3. Ah. Okay. So you know the difference really when you look across the board is at the beginning there was a lot more of this and then at the end there was a lot more of this. So I think that maybe just having the dialogue and sharing ideas just feels a little bit more grounding. So I'm happy about that. But I also wanted to show one last thing, which is something you can do with kids and with families, and that's actual mirroring. And so I'm just going to pick someone if that's okay with you. Liz Crocombe. I'm going to pick you, Liz. You're in the center of my screen. Hi. And what I'd like you to do is when I say go, just make a movement of some type and then stop. And when she stops, all of us are going to mirror that back to her. And then just see what that feels like to have everyone doing exactly what you did a second ago. Okay? So 1, you can do anything, Liz. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now everyone. Good. What's that feel like for you to have everybody repeating what you're doing?
Very strange.
Yeah, and I think for kids, it's a time that they get seen and they get heard and they get valued. And what they're doing is so interesting, everyone else is doing it too. So mirroring is something we do online with kids that can be really, in addition to the emotional charades, stuff that can be really engaging and fun. And sometimes you stand up and do it too. and that can be really fun. So I just also want to tell you, part of my self-care has been to go online with people and groups, and it's been lovely to do that. I find it very nourishing for myself, in addition to being just so happy to connect with you and meet some of you. You're all in different settings too. It's interesting. Some of you are indoors, some of you are outdoors, some of you have pictures behind you. I love to see everybody's artwork when they're at home. So yeah, it's just been lovely to see you all. And I wish you all very well. I hope you stay healthy and you stay happy. And Jackie, I am going to go ahead and sign off at this point, if that's okay. And thank you so much for your attention and your warmth and receptivity. I appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you very much. We've got a few more things to do before we finish up today. It was certainly a great treat to have Eliana be generous enough to share her time with us this morning. Very much. We've got a few more things to do before we finish up today. A couple of resources I just wanted to quickly share with you in line of holding space for others. Robert Jason Grant, some of you might know, is a specialist in autism and play therapy, and he's got a website, and he's just put a whole lot of additional resources for working with children with sensory processing issues and children on the spectrum. So I highly recommend his site to you, as well as the other one that was mentioned today. And he put up a really great way of checking in with children when, or any client I think it's useful for, and I'm even doing it with supervisees now, just a basic check each time we meet. Can you see me and hear me? So that we get some feedback about whether our client can, and to reassure them that we can see and hear them or not, if that's the case. To let them know where we are. So I'm in my home office, no one else is here. Where are you? Is there anyone else there? Because we don't have that same sense of privacy as we do in real life, we don't really know who else is in the background. So I can guarantee right now that I'm in my home office, this is private, and my husband is in a different part of the house, he can't hear this. So I'm curious where you are, and that you're in a private space. Can anyone else see or hear your session? And if so, can you acknowledge you're okay with that? So it might be the case that somebody's living in a really tiny place and everyone's privy to everything. And if they're okay with that and you're okay with that, then you proceed. If they're not okay with that, they might give you some signal, and that might slightly steer the sort of things that you talk about if that child particularly might not be safe. So I think this is a really good and practical checklist, and this will be on the slides that will be up for free on the website too. I'll send you a direct link to that in the next few days. Also wanted to just quickly show you, I mentioned in the first holding space webinar we did last week that some of the innovative resources materials have come online, and what I'd like to do is just really briefly show you what that looks like. They've given me a license just for the next day or two, just to show you 3 of these cards. So this isn't their whole range online. And I know some of you would have, say, the bear cards already. So the digital version come with the booklet, which is a standard booklet that give you a range of exercises and activities you can do. And I know some of, and I'll just show you some of these resources that they have. So it's basically the whole set of bear cards, but it's in this virtual format. And you can use some of these functions to highlight or to even write over these. And I think that's been something that can be useful. You can also, so you can write, and people that you're working with can write on these as well. So this is a little bit more interactive. So it's not quite the same as having them in person, but it's an example of how you might be able to use them. So just an example of those there, and just to show you one more version of those. Strength cards you might know of, body signals, I think. Even to maybe incorporate some of the work that Eliana was talking about, and even having some of these cards that children might be able to identify with as feeling, and then maybe to mirror that themselves and have them act out some of these things. So these are some of the emerging online resources that you might be interested in checking out a little bit further. I just thought I'd share those with you. Our next free webinar in the series, the 3rd one, is available next Monday. It's a little bit later, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, so it's an hour on from where we started now, wherever you started. And there's we've got a great another guest presenter coming along to talk about nature-based therapy. So whether you live in a palatial house with 300 acres that you can walk among, or you're in a tiny one-bedroom apartment growing an avocado from a seed, we can all engage in nature. And I think that's one of the top self-care strategies that people spoke about last webinar, as was something that was really helpful for them at the moment and helping combat the isolation and stress that we're all feeling. So looking forward to hearing Jamie Langley next week. And if you'd like to sign up for that for free, that's available too. So I wish you a lovely week, everybody, and really do take care and look after yourselves. And yeah, thanks a lot for coming. See you next time. Bye now. It was certainly a great treat to have Eliana be generous enough to share her time with us this morning. So thank you all for participating